to another edition of TechNOW Television. You're on the Public Safety Channel with your host, Kevin Wennekes, Chief Business Officer for CATA. And I'm very pleased you could join me today as I have a valued board member and a longtime friend of CATA, Rob Kearney, Vice President of Staffing and Consulting for MaxSys government sector here in Ottawa. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Great to be here.
For those who are joining us today, you know that we're talking about cybersecurity and our skills shortage. But before I dive into those waters, Rob has a really interesting background, a long professional history. And Rob, would you take a moment to fill us in a little bit on what some of that extensive experience includes?
Thanks for the endorsement, Kevin. I'm glad you find it interesting. My wife tells me it's kind of boring because I was a soldier. I'm fourth generation military here in Canada, so I joined at a young age. I went to Carleton University on a military scholarship. Did my undergraduate in geophysics, but then uniquely, instead of going in the technical aspect, I went in what a lot of people call that door kicking, where I went into combat arms, starting off infantry, and then I went in as an armor officer. And for the first chunk of my life, I was doing mostly the traditional, what you'd see on TV, the armored warfare and tanks, the main battle tanks against the Soviets. Things changed. Throughout that career, I started doing less and less pure Army and Armored Corps, and then 9/11 happens. So I wound up being posted to the RCMP 4 times in my career. I did a lot of domestic operations, 16 in total across Canada, everything from more consequence management on the ice floods, ice storms, flooding Manitoba, Quebec, etc., to some of the counterterrorism, counter task force. I was on some of the counter narcotics task force with our good friends and our colleagues at the RCMP. To take the fight down in the Caribbean and other places instead of waiting for it to show up in Canada. And then, as I mentioned, 9/11, I did several tours overseas, former Bosnia, Croatia, former Republic of Yugoslavia, Bosnia, Croatia, Middle East, Cyprus, other parts, 6 exchange with the Americans, multiple tours in Afghanistan, into Kuwait, other parts of the world as well. Domestically, linking back, as I became a senior officer, I came back. I was posted for the tail end of the Vancouver Olympics. I was the lead for the GHG 20 summits. And then right afterwards deployed on a counter-corruption task force, a CJIAD up with the Americans, a combined joint interagency task force made up primarily of various organizations, other government departments and agencies from the U.S., from NSA, CIA, obviously U.S. Department of Defense, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Special Ops, UK equivalents, Canadian equivalents. Coming back, last tour was Chief of Joint Domestic Ops, and on another counterterrorism, and then I left for the private sector to go to another company, and here I am today. So that's my 30-year boring Army background, boring military background.
Well, I'd hardly say boring. I've had the pleasure of being regaled with some of the stories behind that experience, and hopefully everyone watching today that gets to link up with you will have the same opportunity, because you have some really incredible insights. And I think all of that to say, you know, when we're talking about cybersecurity and the type of people, the type of skills, the type of environment that it provides in terms of a career, you're certainly the right person to be talking to. Your whole life's been entrenched around security and defense, and working with some of these people for better or worse. So I'm really pleased to have you here today to provide some of that insight and context for organizations who might also be struggling with identifying appropriate skills and addressing their own skills gap. So I know you weren't able to join us personally for our Cyber Security Forum that we held past November. You did have your team there to take it all in. Obviously, they were there because I'd say that there's some agreement that in terms of cybersecurity and the need for qualified people, there is a gap there. Could you help quantify that or qualify it a little bit for us?
Absolutely. Before I do, thanks to you, Kevin, and the folks at CATAAlliance, and as well as CITIG, because for lack of better terms, and hopefully my Irish Catholic sense of humor won't get in the way, but you are the e-dating of linking the folks in the right, or getting them on the right dance floor to dance with, which is part of the problem out there. With respect to the big gaps, I mean, I'm not going to go into a diatribe about big data and the challenges as well too, but as I've spoken to you several times, the biggest gap out there is I've always been wary of snake oil salesmen. Part of that is serving over 19 in my 30 years in the Middle East, and everybody promising the sun, the moon, and the stars. But I'm always aware of any company, any industry, any agency that claims to be a center of excellence or have all the answers to cybersecurity. The fact of the matter, the crux, and I know I'm telling any listeners out there, and yourself included, with respect to cybersecurity, is there's no silver bullet. There's no panacea out there. With big data and our reliance on the internet, an unregulated internet, and then we try and apply Canadian core values, American core values, Western core values to, again, an unregulated internet, where either our good friends at in China or North Korea or other parts of the world don't have the same regulation, is just near impossible to do. So what does that mean? That means you have to accept risk and realize you have to change the way you're thinking. Overused term, think out of the box, so I won't use it. I just think one of my favorite terms from one of my mentors and former boss, General David H. Petraeus, was he constantly said, the problem is not the problem, ladies and gentlemen, it's how we're looking at the problem. We need to accept the fact that the bad guys or the evildoers are on the network and stop pretending that we can somehow, through various combinations, permutations of firewalls, new technology, or when someone comes in and goes, oh, I've got a real game changer for you, and just realize that it's not. It might be added value, but those filters, firewalls, are just not there. We have to realize that they're on there. It's how we do business. And much of that comes back to basically being able to have business continuity. And how we look at it. Overused term, cybersecurity. Well, what the hell does that mean to other folks? Well, there's basically cyber hacking for personal gain. Someone wants to just make monies or just personal poops and giggles. There's cyber for political statement, like you see the folks that want to hide behind the mask and tell us how to regulate our lives and speak for us, and you probably know the organization I'm talking about there. There's for industrial espionage, because they have better technology, and whether that's an iPhone or an Android or a BlackBerry, and someone else wants to take it, so they want to hack in and get that. And or financials, and then of course there's the all-encompassing terrorists. They want to come in and get their message out and either shut down states as well. So there's probably 40, 50, but those are the four biggest ones that most security and defense people look at. But again, when on cyber professionals, identifying what the actual threats are out there is a real challenge. And again, the thought leaderships, the forums, such as what not just CATA does, but domestically at the municipal, provincial, federal, national and international level are paramount. Again, we're playing on an unregulated internet. Everyone goes, well, duh, of course. But everybody wants to be connected to it. I have been in some of the most powerful, impressive joint operations centers, combined joint, One Eyes, Four Eyes, NATO standard, you name it, in the world. And there's one thing in common. They all got a feed somewhere. Everybody wants to check their Hotmail, Gmail, and everybody wants to update their Facebook status. So when you connect, if you connect, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? There's a way in, there's a way out. It's how you deal with that. And I think the biggest, to get to the crux of what you're talking about, is everybody wants to do the reliance on the technical interoperability and the technology. Pardon me, but Bravo Sierra, as I used to say when I wore camouflage, which is a nicer way of saying BS. It's the people, it's the skill set, and basically coming in there and growing cyber professionals from an early age on, paying them a proper sell, getting them excited and making it a profession, not a job, so they don't bugger off to the private sector. That is key in dealing with the actual capabilities and problem, not the solution that you want to fulfill.
Well, and that's really interesting. I mean, the problems that we're hearing, of course, are how to find that talent and how to qualify that talent. So how would a company like MaxSys be able to help its clients in terms of growing its own cybersecurity resiliency and capacity?
Great question. To connect with probably the majority of the audience listening in now, including yourself, either love hockey or even if they hate it, they know of hockey. There's a reason why, whether it's the Ottawa Senators, Montreal Canadiens, I'll stay away from Toronto Maple Leafs because we'll keep this in a positive conversation, but on a more serious note, you know, hockey culture, yeah, you have businessmen and you have trainers, etc. What is the commonality about everybody in a hockey culture? They come from that background. They come from that culture. So part of the problem is we don't have someone throwing up their hand saying who's the champion. A lot of people want to anoint the Minister of Public Safety. Well, he's an elected public official. What are the chances of getting someone that truly understands the technical, cognitive, behavioral, political, and governance of cybersecurity to, one, get elected, two, get appointed as a cabinet minister, and three, be anointed by the Prime Minister to run public safety? So not that I want to defend politicians, but I'll just say I think that's a bit unfair. But then we have the actual the governance wing of that, PSC, or Public Safety Canada. Same thing. These are public servants that come over and they try and say who's best suited for this job with a whole bunch of caveats, everything from education and language restrictions, etc. So at the end of the day, it's the people we need to get in there. So what does that mean? Going back to the hockey analogy, recruit from that kind of culture. I still am a firm believer, surprise, surprise, I'm prejudiced to me in a positive way, that the Canadian Armed Forces is a huge pool to basically not only recruit from, and I don't look at that as a bad way. I'm not going to apologize to any man or woman in uniform for providing a job to any man or woman in uniform that wants to transition. Who's done it for 10, 15, 20 years when they're pensionable, out of signals intelligence, out of, as a signals officer, a CLE officer's communications, whatever their background is, and say, great, thanks very much for your service. I think we've got a gig for you over at CSIC, or CSIS, or the RCMP, or in the near government, because our good friends at Lockheed Martin, or CGI, or Boeing, or whomever, or some of our like partners in other consulting and staff augmentation, like the CATAAlliance, ADCAs of the world, who want to pool together and provide either a consulting solution or actually put actual folks in the seat. You recruit from that culture. Also, another untapped, yeah, you can go out to the universities as well too and get the best of the best from the Carleton universities, the McGills, the Queens, the Waterloos, the math and computer systems, engineering and science department. But again, they don't come with a proven background, a track record. They're brilliant at what they do, but they don't have a security clearance. They don't know the culture they're getting into, and unfortunately, a lot of them don't want to go into that until we change the demographics out there that we're able to reward them. If they go into the public service right away, if their English is lacking, they're on English training. If their French is lacking, they're on French training. They're doing all these governance side as opposed to truly honing the professional skills where the young and the current. And I don't care whether you're a surgeon, a professional golfer, or a gardener. If you take someone out for several months, let alone years, to go and do something else and bring them back, they're behind. My undergraduates in geophysics, I would probably fail thermodynamics second year if I had to rewrite that damn exam again. Matter of fact, I didn't get that great a mark, don't tell anybody. But we need to keep them in there and set the conditions so they not only stay in Canada, number one, but number two, they actually want to go in this profession. So the government, near government, other folks, we need to get serious about actually creating the profession. Maybe Department of National Defense itself, I know they're thinking about it, but thought leadership's only good if you get it out of PowerPoint and into practicality. We need to go and say, maybe the answer here is to create a brand new trade within the military in cyber security. Maybe it's not a non-commissioned member, traditional private or corporal, or not an officer, traditional lieutenant or captain. Maybe it's a whole new civilian wing or something else where that's what they do for 10, 15, 20 years should they choose to do it. Or other people that might have the skill sets can transfer into it and become a professional on that side. We're not thinking that way, and those that are either aren't getting the leverage or the endorsement or aggressive enough to actually implement it. And while we're talking about it, putting it on PowerPoint and not doing enough thought leadership, the bad guys out there are getting more smart, making us more vulnerable, and messing with our day-to-day lives and everything from paying via debit card to how our weekly pay stub goes into the bank, out of the bank, and just buying something online. And the infamous, when they ask you those last three letter numbers on the back of the card, do I put it in? Is it protected? Have I given up my own data? And I'll end on this. You know, we won't put thought leadership on this one, Kevin. Yet recently, a couple weeks ago, I was at a dinner party, and there was a nameless spouse of a good friend of mine concerned about Facebook and everything else with her child and putting stuff on, and rightly so. I totally agree. Yet I said, you know, you're concerned about Facebook and just photos of yourself and your family. I totally get and understand that. But from a cybersecurity perspective, just a couple quick questions. Do you shop at Michael's or Best Buy? And I knew she did because she loved crafts. So she said Michael's. I said, do you know all the cashiers? You shop there enough at Michael's? And she said, yeah, I know a couple. I said, well, do you go through and sometimes you don't? She said, absolutely. And I said, well, I said, maybe not you, but happily a lot of people go through there, buy $100, show them on their iPhone so they can scan at the 40% discount at Michael's, then give them the credit card, And as they're swiping it through with every bit of data, including your birth date, your height, weight, and everything else you had to get the credit card, give up your postal code to a total stranger. And I said, yeah, we do that because you want the discount, you want the stuff from Michael's. Put all that information out there. We got to make sure it's protected. And so that's just not on a personal side, because it quickly escalates in one of those 4 categories I talked about right up to the terrorist side as well too. Grow a professional cyber war in Canada. We tout ourselves, and rightly so, as G7. Let's step up the plate and do that and be a world leader instead of a follower.
So that's great, Rob. A lot of information shared there. So what I'm getting from it, of course, is that it's not just the people, although people are clearly an important, integral part of the equation, but it's more of a systemic approach to incorporating that talent into your organization. So I want to be respectful of your time, and I certainly appreciate your joining me today. It sounds like there are 2 different audiences that we're approaching here with this particular interview. One being organizations that might look to MaxSys for your services to help address their own shortages, and others from within the military or security services who are looking for a career change or a new path in their career. Both of these groups should be contacting you. What would be your final message to each of these groups today?
I would say that whether you're looking for a job, looking for a placement, or just looking for information or networking, cybersecurity, the topic of today, is at paramount. We've got to stop putting it out as a bumper sticker and then doing that look at squirrel over there and not talking about it. We need to grow an organic professional relationship and a profession here in Canada, and the relationship with the various organizations at multiple levels, including internationals. I would also say, do not undersell the amount of talent in Canada. And I'm not saying it's only in Department of National Defense, specifically Canadian Armed Forces, RCMP, CBSA, CSIC, and CSEC. Other organizations, have grown their own organic folks. But set the conditions to keep them so they can grow, and it can be a professional at all levels. You can't just have the top-end guys and gals understanding with no one underneath, and you can't have just the bottom-end folks that are brilliant at it, but they don't have someone to champion and bring it forward back and forth. But I just want to take it out a bit and say that technology is important. Keep the R&D going and all those great companies that develop the technology, but it's bigger than that. At the end of the day, cybersecurity to me is at least 51%. I think it's a lot more on the people, not the technologies that are touted as a panacea. It is the people that need to understand it at various levels. And the only other thing I will say, if you are in one of those senior positions out there, either in a government or in your government department, know your limitations. Throw up your hand and say, I'm not comfortable in technology, or I'm not comfortable in the actual problem, and bring in those subject matter experts. Because it gets very dangerous when it actually winds up either in the courts or something else, and you have brilliant men and women in either as lawyers or as judge, but what have they spent their whole adult life doing? Understanding and interpreting the law, not the technologies, not the security side of the house. So when we get into those very senior and sensitive levels, it's got to be a balance, and we've got to understand this problem a lot better. Much work to be done, but like I said, we live in Canada. There's much talent out there, so let's find it, hone it. And whether it's where I'm working, which would be absolutely great, but whether it's inside or outside of MaxSys, the beauty of it, I like where I work now, is I encourage, and the whole culture, including our presidents, are encouraged, is to be a community leader on this as well too. Whether that leads to business or not, at the end of the day, that's just added gravy. It's important for us to take this on, and thanks for CATA for setting the conditions to have these kind of discussions and debates.
Well, thanks for taking part in them, Rob. As we continue to roll out our study, I'm certainly going to ask you to come back on and help us position what we're finding and continue to provide that great insight. So until the next time, thank you very much for joining me today, and thanks everyone else for joining us as well.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks to anybody listening in. Cheers. Bye-bye.